He forgave my promiscuous past, but I cheated on him with high school love despite years together. Never thought I was capable of betrayal. For years, I took pride in the lack of deceit in our marriage, in how he and I could always look at one another without a veil of dishonesty. But when it did, it wasn't planned. James forgave my past promiscuity. He knew about the wild years ahead, the hazy faces and passing moments I'd brokered. He didn't judge me, not once. Instead, he looked beyond me in that moment, and more significantly, he envisioned who I could be with him. His love was consistent and warm, the sort of love I hadn't believed I had earned. And I thought it would suffice. Yes, guys, I am here to tell you my story, the way I cheated on my husband. Besides, he accepted me the way I was and forgave my past mistakes. I don't know how I could have done it, but I did, and by cheating on him, I destroyed my whole life. My name is Luna, and I'm 32 years old. I was married to the love of my life, the man who gave me the world and changed my whole life, and yeah, I destroyed it. Met James one drizzly evening in a small bookstore downtown. I was wandering around without any wherewithal, pretending to browse the self-help section, when in actuality I was hiding. My life was chaotic back then. I wasn't seeking a person like him, but James found me anyway. "You look like you need a good poem," he said, presenting me with a book of poetry. His smile was warm, not exactly disarming. I wanted to dismiss him. I'd done it to so many others. Still, I couldn't do it to him. I picked up the book and glanced at the title, The Sun and Her Flowers. "Poetry isn't really my thing," I said, but I thumbed through the pages anyway. "Maybe not," he said, "but everyone needs a bit of beauty in their life." James was nothing like anyone I'd known before. He was steady and honest and calm, the exact opposite of the chaos that had been my life until that point. I had lived recklessly before him. In my 20s, I went after whatever thrill or distraction I could find, hopping from one empty-seeming fling to another. My relationships were toxic, my choices self-destructive. I didn't think I deserved anything better. But James saw me, got me, and he didn't blink when I revealed my past. "You're not your mistakes," he had told me. "That's the person who survived them." He provided me with stability, something I'd never known. With him, I felt safe, loved, whole. For years there, we were building a life together, simple, beautiful, unshakable, or so I thought. I wasn't always the woman James fell in love with. Before him, I was a freak, a girl with a wild heart and an egocentric need for approval that had me getting everything wrong. My relationships were temporary, my nights debaucherous, and my mornings mired in remorse. I was pursuing something nameless and elusive that I believed I'd never find. James encountered me at my lowest, though he didn't know it. It was raining, and I was browsing a bookstore, pretending to give a crumb about the self-help section, when really I was putting off hiding. Running away from the aftermath of my decisions, from who I was becoming. He came up to me, extending a book of poetry with a gentle smile. "You seem like you need this," he told me, handing me The Sun and Her Flowers. I laughed a little bitterly. "I'm not really a poetry person." "Maybe not," he said, undaunted, "but everyone needs a bit of beauty in their life." He lingered, spoke to me, his presence warm and solid in a way that made me uneasy. I wasn't used to someone looking at me, really looking at me, without wanting something back. He wanted to know my favorite books, my dreams, my past. I didn't tell him all of it that night, but I did feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. As we became closer, I was honest about my past. The string of one-night stands, the toxic relationships, the years spent running away from myself. I wanted him to go, to look at me like other people had, like I was irreparably broken. But James didn't flinch. He grabbed my hand and said, "You're not your past. You're the one who made it through." We built a life together for years. He showed me what love could be, steady, kind, forgiving. He overlooked the mistakes I'd made before him, and in return, I vowed to do better. And I was, until Mark came back into my life. Mark was my first love. On an autumn afternoon, James and I got married. The air was brisk, the kind that makes everything feel better and more alive, and the venue was simple but lovely, a barn surrounded by golden fields and trees beginning to blush red and orange. I remember looking at him as I stood at the end of the aisle, my heart pounding. He was waiting for me, his face placid and steady, his eyes brimming with the kind of love that made me feel I could be someone better. Our vows were not perfect, they were real. James shared how he had witnessed me at my most ugly, and yet still chose to believe in the person I had the potential to become. He offered me patience, kindness, and a love that would never fail. At my turn, I talked about gratitude, how I'd never thought I deserved someone like he was, the kind of person who could offer me a commitment, and how I would spend the rest of my life proving to him I was capable of so much more than he thought, that I could be the woman he saw when he looked at me. Our marriage was filled with love, growth, and small rituals, each beautiful. James and I were different in so many ways, but those differences clicked. He was an architect, pragmatic and careful, a man who did his best work in structure and with purpose. I was a graphic designer with a free-spirited, creative vibe, always running after the next idea, the next inspiration. He was fond of clean lines and order. I adored splashes of color and chaos. We complemented each other so well. We created a life that was uncomplicated but significant. You read by the window on Sunday mornings with coffee in hand. Maybe we took walks around the neighborhood at night, talking about everything and nothing. He would write me notes, on the bathroom mirror, on the page where I opened my sketchbook, on the fridge. They were always thoughtful, like, "Good luck with your pitch today," or, "I love how you make everything brighter." But as with any marriage, it was imperfect. James was patient, but he could only go so far. I could hear his voice in my head sometimes, when my impulsiveness annoyed him, like when I took on too many projects at a time or changed plans at the last minute. When he was upset, he'd get quiet, never yelling or raising his voice, which made his disappointment often seem to penetrate that much deeper. Still, I never questioned his love, and all the while I felt like we'd go through anything, and we'd be fine. James and I had constructed a life that was steady, even idyllic. His love was my anchor, his patience my safe harbor. But when Mark resurfaced in my life, everything I knew about myself, everything I'd built with James, started to come undone. Mark was my high school boyfriend, the boy who had warmed me when I didn't even know I was cold. He was a wild, free spirit, erratic in all the ways that made my heart race in both fear and anticipation. In those days, our bond was pure passion and chaos, a tempest I could never wholly quell. He was my first heartbreak, but he was also the first person I ever felt fully alive with. When his message appeared one afternoon, I felt a glimmer of something I hadn't experienced in years. Nostalgia, maybe, or curiosity. "Hey, long time no see, how have you been?" It seemed innocent enough, a brief message from someone who had once meant so much to me. I told myself it was nothing, just catching up. James would understand. Mark and I started talking. At first it was light, reminiscing about high school, making jokes about how long it had been. But as days turned into weeks, our conversations became deeper. He inquired about my life, my job, and my marriage. I described James to him, how stable and loving he was. Mark listened, but there was always an undertone to his words, a quiet reminder of the girl I was when I was with him. "It's like you've changed," he said one night, his voice warm but edged with something. "You're so together now. I remember how you used to be fearless." "I'm still fearless," I retorted, laughing, but the thought lingered. Was I fearless, or had I given up that piece of me for safety? When I saw Mark again, the first time, I was meant to keep it casual. He was in the city for work and offered to meet for coffee. I was hesitant, but rationalized that it was harmless. I didn't tell James, I don't know why. Perhaps some small portion of me suspected it wasn't so innocent as I wanted to believe. Mark was there, and walking into the cafe was a trip back in time. He was older, of course, but the way he smiled at me, as if I were the only person in the room, made my heart race. We chatted for hours, and the conversation came so easily it terrified me. Mark had an ability to see me, to remind me of who I was 2 years before life with James. He made fun of me and my settled life, but there was no meanness in it, just a familiarity that was intoxicating. "You ever miss it?" he said as we stepped out of the cafe. "That wild, free part of yourself?" "I don't know," I said, though I did know. Sometimes I did miss it. We started meeting more often. Coffee became lunch, then dinner. I told myself every time that it was merely two old friends catching up, but inside I knew it was more than that. When Mark laughed, he'd touch my arm briefly, or lean in just a bit too far when he spoke. There was a charge between us that I hadn't experienced in years. It terrified me, but it excited me too. One night after dinner, he walked me to my car. The air felt heavy, that kind of stillness where suddenly every word felt louder. "I missed you," he said in a low voice. "Mark," I said, but I didn't have the time to finish before he kissed me. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped him, left him alone, but I didn't. At that moment, all I could think of was how alive I felt, how much I'd missed this fire, this chaos. One kiss turned into a downward spiral, fast. I started sneaking off to meet Mark and lying to James about where I was or who I was with. When I was around Mark, he made me feel alive. He reminded me of who I was. But at home with James, the burden of my guilt was unbearable. James would gaze at me with his deep, comforting eyes, inquire as to the events of my day, and I would tell a fib. I felt bad about myself for doing it, but I couldn't help it. But Mark basked in the secrecy. "It's like old times," he said once, laughing while pulling me into his arms. "You and I against the world." But it wasn't like old times. This wasn't the reckless freedom of our youth. This was a betrayal, and it was consuming me alive. The last time I saw Mark, we met at a hotel. I promised myself it would be the last time, that I had to end it. But the moment I laid eyes on him, my resolve melted. "You don't have to go back," he said softly as he tucked a strand of hair out of my face. "We could have something again that is real." At one moment I thought of it. I pictured walking out and starting over with Mark, but then I thought about James, about the life we'd built, the love he'd given me so freely, and I knew I couldn't do it. "I can't," I said teary-eyed. "I love him." Mark stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I hope he knows how lucky he is," he said, his voice low yet heavy with sadness. James was the type of guy who noticed the small stuff. It was always how he had been, attuned to nuances that others missed. It was one of the things I loved most about him, but also what I never knew would be my undoing. I assured myself when my affair with Mark began that I was being careful. But the guilt has its way of leaving trails, and James, with his observant and watchful manner, began to sense the fractures long before I was aware they existed. It started slow, with little things. I'd forget to say where I'd been, or return home later than usual with a hurried explanation. My phone, which had once been left haphazardly on the counter or on the couch, suddenly became a thing I kept close to me, with the screen face down and locked. When he would ask how my day was, I would respond way too fast or offer vague, hollow replies that didn't match the specifics I'd been giving before. James didn't confront me. Instead, he watched. It was one of those nights when I believed I had been so careful that I left my first genuine gaffe. I'd been with Mark, a hasty, reckless rendezvous at a hotel, and on the way out, I'd stuffed the receipt into my purse without thinking. James was waiting for me when I got home, sitting on the couch with a book in his lap. He looked up when I entered, his face tranquil, though there was a heaviness in his eyes that I didn't recognize at the time. "How was your day?" he asked, his voice steady. "Good," I said too quickly. "Just busy with work." He nodded, looked at me a second, then returned to his book. I went up, feeling I had dodged another bullet. The next morning, while I was getting ready, I lost the receipt. The realization that it was gone made my heart sink. I told myself I must have thrown it away, but I knew better. Afterward, James became more aware. He began asking more questions, small, harmless-seeming questions like, "Who were you on the phone with?" Or, "What time is your meeting tomorrow?" At first I didn't think much of it, but over time his questions felt pointed, as if he were connecting the dots. I started to panic. I began deleting texts and clearing my call history, but the more I tried to cover my tracks, the more paranoid I felt. And every time he looked at me, I felt naked, as if he could see all the way through me. And then there were the times he'd surprise me, or the time he blithely asked, "Do you ever think about your high school days?" I froze for a brief moment, just long enough for him to catch it, before trying to play it off with a laugh. One night after work, I walked in the door to find James in the kitchen cooking dinner. The rich aroma of garlic and herbs filled the air, and he welcomed me, as always, with openness. And for a split second, the pang of guilt was so acute that it almost took my breath away. When we sat down, he poured us both glasses of wine and lifted his toast. "For ourselves," he said, his smile softening. "For all that we've built together." I forced a smile and clinked my glass with his, feeling the heaviness of his words on my back. What I didn't know was that James had already worked everything out. The receipt I'd lost, the suspicious phone calls, and the inconsistencies in my stories. It had all added up. But rather than facing me, he chose to wait, to plan. He began leaving bits of his own signs, a note on the refrigerator that said, "Some things can't be taken back." It was something about trust being the foundation of any relationship. And one night he even asked, "Do you think people can really change?" I didn't know it at the time, but he was paving the way for what lay ahead. James was always a rational man, one who addressed issues with reasoned exactitude. When he began to feel doubtful of me, he didn't attack or confront me baselessly. Instead, he watched, noted, and quietly started putting the pieces of truth together. Those suspicions had been building for weeks. My late nights, the vague reasons, the way I flinched when he touched my phone. James wasn't the type to dismiss his instincts, but he also wasn't the type to follow his instincts without evidence. So, he decided to gather it. One evening, when I was out, James did something I never thought he would do. He grabbed my car keys, which are on a dish by the door, and walked into the garage. Sitting in the driver's seat, he painstakingly placed a GPS tracker under the dashboard. It certainly wasn't something he would have done casually, but by now, his doubts had gotten too big to pretend they didn't exist. He reminded himself that it was just precautionary, one way of confirming or disproving the pesky thoughts that wouldn't let him sleep. But deep inside, he knew the answer. I would find out these details later on. The next time I mentioned that I was headed out to meet a client for work, James smiled and kissed me goodbye, his demeanor as placid as ever. But the second I walked out, he had opened a GPS app on his phone and had tracked my car as its location had popped onto the screen. The tracker showed that I was not going to the place I told him. In fact, I was going in the opposite direction. I can imagine how he had felt and how I broke his heart. His stomach may be twisted as he tracked the tiny point on the map toward the edge of the ballpark. His worst fears were confirmed when the car stopped in front of a hotel. However, instead of going up to me right away, he chose to stalk me. James drove to the hotel and parked far enough so I wouldn't see him. He watched from some distance as I emerged from the car, my shoulders stiff, my head turning as if I were checking to see if anybody was watching. Then he saw Mark. As he had seen the tall, handsome man with the center part in his hair walk past the window, his heart sank because he knew the man well, probably too well. My arm received his touch as he said wordlessly to Mark, "Hello." I smiled at him, a smile James hadn't seen for months. As soon as the two of you vanished into the hotel, James pulled out his phone and took a photo of the entrance. Now, his hands were steady, his mind clear on the task at hand. Over the next few weeks, James continued this process, collecting evidence each time I met with Mark. He photographed us arriving and departing the hotel together, standing too close in parking lots, and stealing moments that belonged to him. He didn't challenge me, however, not yet. Instead, he gathered everything, photos, timestamps, even GPS records. He wanted the truth, empirical proof of what I was doing. And as the controversies mounted, so did his defiance. So yeah, he did find out everything I had done. And while he did, he also was planning his revenge. He didn't confront me. Instead, he waited because he wanted me to feel the same way he felt. James's revenge didn't come from a place of wanting to hurt me. It was a product of deep betrayal and heartbreak, of loving someone so wholly and then realizing they had broken it all. He didn't want to ruin me, but he needed me to realize the magnitude of what I had done. And he wanted to be sure I never forgot how much I'd lost. Weeks of quietly assembling evidence, and James embarked on his scheme. He wasn't going to confront me and get into a fight. He was going to shed light on my infidelity in a way that would force me to face the full weight of my actions. No getting out of it, no excuses. It began on a Tuesday, one afternoon when I arrived home to the house quieter than usual. The lights were off, and James's car was not in the driveway. At first I paid no mind, thinking he was just working late. But then I saw a letter on the kitchen counter. I opened it and my heart sank reading the first line. I know everything. A wave of cold panic washed over me. My hands trembled as I read further. I have proof, and I want you to know what you've done. The letter then spent pages recounting it all. Every meeting with Mark, every lie I told, every deception I had crafted into our life together. This wasn't simply a list of facts. It was an accusation of how my betrayal had shattered the trust he had in me. It finished with a basic command. Let's meet at the hotel where you and Mark have been. I'll be waiting. I didn't know what to think. I was horrified, but part of me still thought it might be a kind of gotcha. That perhaps James had forgiven me, and this was a test, but I knew in my heart it would not be. My heart raced as I drove to the hotel in a daze. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted James's car in the same space where I used to meet Mark. He stood there waiting for me, but his face was not the man I knew when he saw me. There was no anger, just a cold, quiet rage that left my blood turn to ice. James didn't yell at me. He didn't even say anything at first. He just gestured for me to follow him into the hotel lobby. We hadn't even reached the elevator before I realized what I was doing. Internally, the door slid shut with a soft, mechanical hum. Then, as the elevator started to go up, James pulled his phone out. He didn't share the photos he had taken or the evidence he had collected. He didn't need to. Just the look on his face said everything. The subtle way he controlled the situation made me see that this was not revenge, as I had always thought. It wasn't about yelling, crying, or even fighting. It was about something much more terrible, reclaiming control of his life and leaving me to bear the weight of my decisions. As soon as the elevator doors opened, James took me down the hall to a room, a suite. It was where I had hung out with Mark. The moment the door opened, I was hit with a wave of nausea. The same space where my treachery had occurred again and again, now the stage for my comeuppance. There was nothing else in the room but one thing, a large black screen on the wall, the type you would use for presentations or screenings. James motioned for me to sit. Watch, he said simply. I sat terrified as the lights dimmed and the screen crackled to life. At first, I couldn't tell what I was looking at, but then the images started playing, and I understood what he had done. This was a recording, a video of all the time I had spent with Mark. Every kiss stolen, every touch taken, every time I lied to James, broke his trust. It was as if I was watching my own betrayal play out in front of me, but not just any video. The footage was of good quality, and it was obvious that James had taken great pains to ensure that everything was recorded. In the video, I saw myself, laughing, touching Mark, behaving as if I were living in an alternate reality, one in which James didn't seem to exist. My heart sank lower with each consecutive frame, and the sheer weight of my actions was a burden squeezing the very life out of me. The lights returned when the video finished. James was standing behind the door, motionless, staring right at me. Do you understand now? He said in a low and steady voice. Do you finally understand what you've done? I couldn't speak. I had never been able to meet his gaze. The shame was suffocating. He wouldn't allow me time to reply. Instead, he stepped forward, and I saw cold fury with my blood in his eyes. You've ruined us, and now you're never going to forget it. James had a good reason for blowing up my life all of a sudden. It was far worse. He made sure that I wasn't able to escape from the gulf of my own actions, and he made me live with my actions. For the next few weeks, he made sure I couldn't get away with it. He reminded me of my betrayal, recalling his stillness over me, my power over me, day after day. He went through everyone I'd ever been close with, friends, family, coworkers, and showed them the video. He didn't tell me, but he ensured that the people I loved knew who I had become. Initially, I tried to reach him, to apologize, to beg him to come back, but he never answered. He didn't need to. Every time I called or texted, I saw that same frozen, murderous look on his face, the same look he'd had in the hotel room, watching me fall apart. James's final act of revenge was to file for divorce. One afternoon, papers arrived at my doorstep, together with a sucker punch, a copy of the video. In the papers, he had asked that I be never allowed to see or speak to him again. It wasn't only the end of our marriage, it was the end of my capacity to ever undo the damage I had done. He had stolen everything from me, my home, my future, my dignity. He had taken away everything, and he had forced me to be nothing but a walking reminder of the decisions I had made. After James left, after he took everything, our home, our life together, everything that meant anything, I was left numb and devastated. The house that we had built together, the one I had started to think of as my refuge, was not mine anymore. Despite being in the empty space, I felt more at home among the remains of the things that used to exist, doing what was before. The first few days were by far the worst. The silence in the house was loud. I was completely lost and had no idea how to even start the process of piecing together my life when everything I owned felt like it lay in ruin. I contacted friends, but few were still close or didn't know how to support me. After all, James had made sure the truth was known. Nobody was going to comfort the woman who had cheated on the man who had given her his trust. My finances were in turmoil. James had made sure that I wouldn't be able to keep the house. He had sold it, leaving me homeless. The savings we had accumulated were now his, and I was left with a few $1,000s in my bank account and no plan. I raced to secure an apartment, yet facing unstable income and lacking a solid plan, I had limited options. The places I could afford were small, dark, and without life, much like I felt deep inside. I found myself in a tiny apartment in a bad part of town, and it didn't feel like anything near home. It could not have been further from the life I had had with James. I was unable to do anything inside the small, empty space. The burden of my choices, of the mistakes I had made, rested upon me as a weight of flesh. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't summon the energy to do anything other than survive. My workplace, once my sanctuary of consistency and routine, was now collateral damage in my destruction. I tried to remain professional and fulfill my job duties, but my personal life was drowning me. The guilt tortured me endlessly, and everything I did felt impossible. I couldn't concentrate. It all felt, every email, every meeting, like it was taking place in a far-off world, and I was far too gone to engage. One day I erred in such a way that the company lost a key client. I had been running a key project, one I'd once felt assured about, but I was so blinded by my emotions, by the crushing weight of my own guilt, that I missed something essential. I botched a deadline, miscalibrated a client's timeline, and they pulled out. It was an expensive mistake, and there was no way to hide the fallout. When my boss asked me to come into the office, I instinctively knew what it meant. His expression was frigid, his tone cutting. He wanted to know what happened, and I had no rational explanation to offer. How could I? Now there was nothing I could say there to make up for the failure. I was burned out, destroyed, and couldn't even process or manage things I used to pride myself on. "You're a liability to this company," he said to me, his tone flat. "We cannot afford mistakes like this. I'm sorry, but we need to let you go." The words landed like a kick to the gut. My world, already coming apart, spun out of control. Without James, without my job, I was nothing. A depth of emptiness followed me around every day, even more than before. I am now looking for a job and trying to survive. I can't talk to anyone. Sometimes I think I'm depressed now, but one thing I know, I deserved everything I'm going through. James forgave me once, and I thought I could cheat on him because he would always be there. Now he is gone, and I am left alone. I know I will be judged a lot, but I won't tell you not to judge me. I deserve it, so go ahead. Just please help me go through this. Thank you for reading my story. Luna, update. Hello, Reddit guys. I am Luna again. I am here for a small update since everyone asked for it. Months have passed since everything collapsed, and life hasn't gotten easier. It is like a numb day after day, going through the same shit of tiredness and guilt, piecing bits together, but the pressure of it all won't let you breathe. I'm still sitting in that little dark apartment, the walls closing in on me, feeling as if they are moving closer every day. The space is nothing like the life I used to have, but it's all I can afford now. Every morning I wake up, and little by little, I try to displace this crushing feeling on my chest with whatever I can get my hands on. The job search is endless, and every day I find myself at my computer, filling out applications, reworking my resume to align with the jobs I'm applying to, while it all feels like an exercise in futility. Rejection emails stack up in my inbox, and each one is a little cut to my already delicate sense of self-worth. There are days when I don't even have the energy to open them because I know what they're going to say. I tell myself I'll get through this, that things will eventually turn around. But the longer it takes, the more that hope slowly drains away, replaced by frustration and the growing realization that I may never clear up the mess I've made of my life. Every job interview is a reminder of what I lost, of how ill-prepared I feel to move on. I don't know, underwater, like I am so far behind, and everyone else is moving on, and I'm stuck treading water. The solitude is overwhelming. Not that I hear from much of anyone anymore. Friends have fallen away from me, and I don't blame them. Who would want to be around a guy like me? I backstabbed the man who believed in me, and now I can't evade the fallout. My phone calls very infrequently, and when it does, it's either a cold call or no big deal. There's no one to turn to, no one to help me out of this. It's just me, and the isolation is something I'll just have to deal with. Now, even while I'm still struggling to cling to some hopeful glimmer, part of me understands that this could be my life from here on out, the result of every mistake I've ever made. The burden of regret doesn't ever completely lift. I have no idea how to get through it. I don't know if I ever will. It's difficult to think about the future when the past seems to have such a tight hold on me. All the steps I attempt to take forward seem like they are steps backward. I used to think time would heal, and that I could build and rebuild my life, only to realize that I am standing still, waiting for something that may never arrive. Life is hard, and I'm still looking for a way to navigate it, but I know now that they may never be the same. The couple of times that I ran into James after their whole life had crumbled, it was like seeing a ghost. He was a stranger now, a ghost of the man I used to know so well. I would see him occasionally, walking down the street or near a shop, but when his eyes fell on me, it was as if he did not even see me. The man who once loved me, who once trusted me with everything, looked at me like I was the most complete stranger. I remember the first time I laid eyes on him post-divorce. It was at a cafe, and I was sitting by myself, nursing a cup of coffee. I didn't expect to see him. I didn't want to, but this person was passing by with someone else. He didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He was staring straight ahead as if I weren't even there. I wanted to shout and plead for one last chance to explain myself, but the words clawed at my throat. He was so different now, so far away. It hurt, of course. It was more painful than I could ever articulate, but I got it too at the same time. After all I had done, I didn't deserve his attention, his forgiveness. And he did not need one word to convey that message. As for Mark, well, things didn't go according to my expectations. After all was revealed, after James had laid my betrayal out for all to see, Mark didn't stick around. Deep down, I think he knew all along that I wasn't someone who could ever commit to him. He'd been my escape, my distraction, not a person I could really build a life with. When James found out, Mark left my life as abruptly as he'd entered it. So I just destroyed my life. I am still trying to put myself together and live, but it is very difficult. I just hope that things will get better with time. Thank you everyone for your time. Luna.